Hurry Up Tomorrow is a recently released 2025 film directed by Trey Edward Shults, starring The Weeknd, Jenna Ortega, and Barry Keoghan. You might be thinking after watching this movie, what do all the confusing symbolism and story elements mean? Can a movie that's written by, produced by, meant to be about, and starring the same one guy actually be any good? Well, I'm gonna get into all of that this video, but first I need to give you a quick plot overview and a warning for major spoilers ahead. So the movie follows Abel, pretty much The Weeknd playing himself, and he's having a really rough time after a girlfriend breaks up with him over voicemail, basically calling him a horrible person. He has insomnia, he's starting to have problems with his singing voice, he can't accept the end of his relationship, he doesn't want to perform, and his manager Lee, played by Barry Keoghan, is pushing him to keep going, giving him drugs and alcohol to keep him performing at all costs. While all this is happening, we see Anima, played by Jenna Ortega, setting fire to her mum's house before attending Abel's next concert. During the performance, Abel's voice cuts out. He can't sing, and in this moment of desperation, he makes eye contact with Anima before he runs away off stage. Anima finds a way to sneak behind stage, she bumps into him, and they go on a little fun night together. They have a great time, they stay in a different hotel, but in the morning, their connection is broken. Abel wants to reconnect with his manager and move on with the tour and leave Anima behind. It was just a one-night thing. Anima, unhappy with this, donks Abel on the head, and he wakes up tied to the bed as she tries to force him to confess his darkest secrets. And that's pretty much the whole story. So what the frick does any of that actually mean? This whole movie seems to be about Abel, aka The Weeknd, exploring his own personal struggles, trying to delve into his psyche, and overall, it appears to largely be an apology or an explanation or a justification for a 2022 incident on stage in which he cancelled a concert after the first song, unable to sing properly. In the film, Tesfaye presents himself as a man taken advantage of by his manager, burdened by the expectations of his fans. At one point, his manager even describes him as not a human being, but a supernatural one with the obligation to perform for the thousands of people that love him. Lee, his manager, appears to manipulate him with drugs and alcohol, feeding his ego until the weight of his health problems, his failed relationship, and all the expectations surrounding him just becomes too much, culminating in his on-stage breakdown. The whole plot of this film kind of feels like Tesfaye feeling obligated to explain or justify that incident that would have been truly embarrassing for him. I can understand that, but I think what he kind of fails to see here is that the rest of the world has completely moved on from that. Like me, who doesn't even really know him, I don't follow The Weeknd that much, I know a few of his songs, I'd never even heard of that thing, and for his fans as well, I doubt they're all still thinking about that incident from 3 years ago. But it kind of feels like Tesfaye feels as if this is something that he needs to explore and project onto the big screen, and whether it's his intention or not, it is going to draw attention back to that 2022 concert. Seeing Tesfaye consume alcohol, cocaine, and other drugs on screen is likely a representation of his real-life struggles with substance abuse, and he seems to want to appear vulnerable on screen in an attempt to seem like a genuine flawed person, just like you or me, facing human struggles that we all face. Look, I'm not quite sure that the whole celebrities are people too message really lands here. Like, look, I do strongly believe that anyone, no matter how famous, no matter how rich, they are deserving of empathy as another human being. But at the same time, it's hard to take that seriously when it does appear in a movie like this that really does feel like a personal brand vanity project. I don't think the Weeknd's intentions here are necessarily bad, but I also don't think that this message lands very well with your average cinema goer, with somebody who doesn't have access to the crazy amount of wealth that somebody like the Weeknd probably does have. But anyway, let's go a little bit deeper, because all of that is just scratching the surface level of some of the symbolism within this film. Throughout the movie, Abel is presented as a man and a character who doesn't have a good relationship with women. From the opening scene of the film, in which we hear the voicemail message from his ex-partner saying how he's treated her horribly, made her feel small, and that his mum would be ashamed of him, to his choice to abandon Anima after their night together, just using her for emotional catharsis and then expecting to walk out the door the next day like nothing happened. Earlier in the film, we see Abel in a drug-fueled rage, abusing his ex-girlfriend over the phone, telling her that she'll never be anything without him. This is a rather bizarre addition to the film, because if we're meant to take this character as a true representation of Tesfaye himself in real life, are we meant to believe that this is how he treats women? Is he wanting to confess to the world that he's verbally abusive towards women and that he uses many of them as emotional crutches, but then abandons them right afterwards? Is that what he's trying to say? Anima calls out this behavior in the film, suggesting that Abel's using all of his relationships purely as a source of inspiration for his songs, and it's just so confusing, because even if this is Tesfaye trying to genuinely present his flaws on the cinema screen for the world to see, you can't help but raise an eyebrow when it's written and produced and acted by Tesfaye himself. He isn't known to have treated women badly as far as I can see in the media. He hasn't had any major controversies. So why did he feel it necessary to include this plot and character element in the film? Is it meant to be a critique on male celebrity behavior as a whole? Is it yet again part of an attempt from Abel to appear as a flawed, average Joe kind of guy who we should have sympathy for? My other theory is that perhaps this plot line is meant to address some of the controversy surrounding his other show, The Idol, which he also co-wrote and starred in. A lot of people accuse that show of being deeply misogynistic. I haven't watched it, so I don't know, but maybe this is Tesfaye trying to apologize for this, or knowingly admit the errors of the show in retrospect, and maybe there could have been real sincerity in his intentions for that, but it's all just erased through the film's conclusion, in which Tesfaye is depicted as heroic through singing to Anima, finally opening up to her. It still doesn't really feel like he faces the consequences of how his character treated these women in the storyline of the film. So I don't think it really does line up as any kind of message surrounding the idol. I think maybe that's unlikely, a bit of a reach. But again, there's even more confusing symbolism to explore here, mainly surrounding the bizarre dream sequences and the whole character of Anima. In interviews, Tesfaye has explained that he suffers from sleep paralysis and that the movie attempts to convey this experience within the dream sequences. For example, when we see Abel almost drowning in a bathtub, unable to move and unable to see the blurry figure standing above him. This idea is also represented through Abel literally being tied to the bed as Anima taunts him with his own music, breaking down the lyrics and the supposed deeper meaning of the songs. She's kind of like a sleep paralysis demon at that part of the film. According to an article from Screen Rant, the name Anima actually refers to the unconscious feminine side of a man's mind, if you view this movie through the lens of Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. Apparently, Anima is meant to be a visceral metaphor for Abel's inability to truly connect with women and represents his toxic relationships from the past, the primary source of his distress throughout the film. Supposedly, Lee, his manager, represents another side of Abel's psyche, his ego, And when Anima kills Lee, I think it's maybe meant to represent the death of Abel's ego, but that just doesn't quite land here in this movie because the whole thing kind of feels like one big self-indulgent ego trip. And let me ask you this question: if somebody has a big enough ego to make a movie starring themselves about themselves killing off their own ego, have they really done that? That just kind of seems like something that someone with a massive ego would do. And when Abel is actually able to escape from Anima through this lens, it's kind of suggested that he has reconciled with that feminine side of his mind. Again, it seems like these were the intentions, but I really just don't think this movie sticks the landing. The confusing dream sequence in which he travels down an escalator and sees a creepy screaming woman as well as a child wrapped in a blanket, it seems like that's a journey into his inner psyche, but overall to me, it still feels very unclear what those figures are meant to represent. I'm a bit stumped on that one, guys, so please let me know down in the comments what you think. And then on top of this whole thing with Anima's arc, burning down her parents' house, it doesn't really make any sense. She has such a cliche backstory which she explains in a big exposition dump about how her dad left her family early and her mom having to do all the work to look after the family. So why the frick does she burn her mom's house down? How does that connect to Abel? Overall, this movie just feels like a bloated, self-indulgent music video. I know it sounds harsh, and yes, maybe the creators behind this were trying to create a film that really did have something genuine and vulnerable to say, but all kind of sincerity and humility just feels completely removed when the climax of the film is Abel singing his latest new song, and somehow that stops Anima from wanting to kill him. It saves the day and all is forgiven. It just completely takes the wind out of those sails. It feels like Tesfaye isn't able to see past his own hubris here. Essentially, he's trying to show how difficult his life supposedly is, but it's hard to take seriously. There isn't really much of a story, the pacing is very slow and gets frustrating. They overuse the 360-degree camera spin to a point where it just becomes dizzying. But look, I will say there is some moments here of beautifully creative cinematography as well. The actual shots and contrast and lighting I thought looked really expressive. I really liked it. And the synthy science fiction musical tones, they are enjoyable to listen to. I think director Trey Edward Shults is trying his best with the material he's got here. And for a good hour, I really was on board with this. I thought maybe they were going to do something interesting, but then it just turned into a big puff piece for the Weeknd. There's a scene here where Anima is listening to Abel's music, and yes, it's actual real life, the Weeknd music, and she starts crying because of how beautiful it is and how it really touches her. And that just felt so on the nose, and I've got to say, so cringeworthy. It was just so self-congratulatory. I can't describe it as anything else. The story here really should have been its own self-contained plot that, yes, connected to the Weeknd, but still stood on its own 2 feet. That's not the case here, and it feels like this movie just wants to kind of succeed on vibes alone, but it's just not enough. Even the prolonged opening credits where we see, again, director Trey Edward Shults' name appear multiple times, again and again, for all these different roles that he's done on the film, it just feels a bit over the top. And look, this might also sound really harsh, but pretty much half the cinema was talking the entire movie. They were taking photos of the screen. They were on their phones. Does that represent the caliber of your average The Weeknd fan? Look, I understand that's probably not very nice of me. I'm sure there's plenty of intelligent people that seriously follow The Weeknd and like his music. That's probably just me being salty about that movie-going experience, but I've got to say, this whole thing overall was pretty disappointing. So I'm going to give Hurry Up Tomorrow 2 stars out of 5. it does look refreshingly more cinematic than a lot of things that you'll see in cinemas today. It's got contrast for once, which is really nice to see, but it doesn't really have much value beyond some interesting vibes and The Weeknd being self-indulgent. Let me know in the comments below if you think I missed out on any hidden symbolism in the film, or if I got anything wrong. Please consider subscribing, dropping a like. Your support really means a lot, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.